Charles in the hot seat to answer your burning questions. And the very first question that we'll kick off with, Mrs. Charles, curfew is on, businesses are closed, and there's a lot of confusion about what are the protocols that exist and govern our life today. And we just really want to know what other essential businesses will be opened soon.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the hot seat this evening, and let me say good evening to your viewers. Protocols, protocols, protocols. I think to a certain extent, a lot of St. Lucians are saying, oh God, I'm tired of that word protocols. However, from very early on last year, with the introduction of the pandemic into St. Lucia, we indicated to St. Lucians that perhaps the way of life that we know it, and we termed it the new normal, would be in existence for a while. And unfortunately, the new normal entails us having those type of protocols to guide our daily activities. We need them. They are necessary because it is when we observe them, we see that there will be a decline in the spread of the virus. So just by a simple explanation, the virus, as we all know, is spread by movement, people to people, people interacting with people. And if you would recognize the various protocols that we put in place, most of them are to lessen the interaction from people to people. So for example, you and I, we are supposed to be sitting 6 feet apart from each other, and that is because of the distance that the virus can travel when we speak or shout. And so that is one of the protocols that are in place. In terms of the business places, the reasons we have those protocols in terms of limiting the hours that they operate or limiting whether they are closed or whether they are open, that is to ensure that we can restrict to a certain extent the movement of people and to curtail us spreading the virus from one place to another. I'm sure you've heard the stories of persons who've gone to get tested. Perhaps they were not feeling well. The results have not come back, but they go to the bank, they stand on the line. They go to the supermarket, they stand on the line. They go by the neighbor to go and get some sugar or rice, and you have that level of interaction because it's like life as normal. And so the protocols are there to help us and to remind us that it is not normal. This is a new normal, and we have to be a bit more cautious in terms of how we live and how we operate. So currently, the protocols that are in effect at this point in time, they're scheduled to end at midnight this evening, is limited operations of non-essential business places. Now, a lot of people, they deem what is essential to them and what is non-essential to them. However, I have to remind St. Lucians that we are always guided by the Ministry of Health. They are the ones who determine what type of activity that person should be engaging in, what type of activities that are riskier than others, and based on that, we determine what type of engagement some businesses can have and some businesses cannot have. So it is not because we like this one or we don't like this one or we prefer SNS like everybody's calling for, but it is only because we're trying to limit the movement and the interaction and get persons perhaps at this point in time to ensure that we can have a decline in the virus to stay at home as much as possible.
Will curfew be continued from 7 p.m.? And you said limited interaction with certain essential, what we may deem essential. Do you think that some of these businesses can last being closed for 3 months?
Certainly not. And so perhaps I need to also explain that the state of emergency that we have gone to Parliament yesterday and is being debated as well by the Senate today is very different to the curfew. And so the state of emergency, what it does, it allows the government the flexibility to restrict people's movement by implementing a curfew. So the curfew is not the same as the state of emergency. We have taken the curfew by restricting people's movement in the evening. And that is specific. People ask whether COVID is spread at night. It is not that COVID is spread at night. What happens is during the day, you have greater supervision, and it is easier for persons to follow the protocol. But I think you and I both know that especially over the holidays during the December month, very early in January, people were just restless and you had a lot of quote unquote secret parties, secret activities, people congregating in different forums. And as a result of that, We got that information from our contact tracing, because once some person tests positive, they ask you, where have you been, who have you been with, where were you going, etc. And a collaboration of that information told us that there were a lot of extracurricular activities happening, especially in the evening time. During that time, if the police catches you, Crystal, driving from Castries going up north, they have no legal or legitimate reason to stop you and ask you where you're going. You could be going to a party, you could be going to anywhere, but they cannot stop you. And so what we decided to do, based on a request from the Ministry of Health, is to institute a curfew to restrict people's movement at night and to see how we could curb those kind of activities from happening, to ensure that persons could stay home and to keep safe and stop spreading the virus. And hence the reason we have the curfew. So the curfew came in the first instance of 7 days. We will be instituting a further 7 days. And as we look at the numbers, whether they are spiking or whether they are declining, the ministry will now make the recommendation and say, I think it's okay, we can cut off the curfew for now, for another week. But if the figures go back up, then we need to reinstitute it. And so persons were asking, why 90 days? That's the reason. We needed a period of time that if we need to act, we could just act very quickly. Every time you need to institute either a state of emergency, you must go to Parliament. So if you have it in 30-day tranches, it means every 30 days you have to go to Parliament to seek approval, etc., etc. And so we asked for a 90-day period, and you would appreciate this is not the first time. We had a 90-day state of emergency last year between the period July to September. Life was as usual. Businesses were open. People were carrying on as normal as possible, but we put that state of emergency in place to ensure that in case there was a spike in cases, we could quickly implement a curfew, restrict people's movement in order to allow for there to be a decline in the spread of the virus. So that's the reason we now have both the curfew and the state of emergency.
The Prime Minister has been addressing the nation for a number of times, of course, during this period, because it is an extraordinary period, for want of a better term. The Prime Minister addressed the nation last week, and then he addressed the nation again on Monday. And there's a lot of confusion. Why did he address the nation? People were not sure of the purpose of his address. Can you shed light on what the purpose of Monday's address was?
Well, I think in order to shed light on the purpose of Monday's address, we need to go back to the previous address. So the previous address was specific, very specific to the revision of the protocols, the announcement that we would be instituting a state of emergency and we will be going to Parliament to seek approval for that state of emergency. And it was important that as the leader of the nation, that the Prime Minister be the one to bring out the news and to address St. Lucians as their leader. Last week's address, you would have noticed, coincided with the opening or the launching of our Independence Day activities. Unfortunately, we are celebrating independence under different circumstances. Last year we had COVID, but the impact was not so widespread, so we were able to celebrate in a different way. This year you have the launch of independence, and everything, or mostly every single activity, will be virtual. It was important for the Prime Minister to launch the opening of independence and remind St. Lucians where we are with COVID. So a lot of persons will say some of the same things he said in the last address, he said it again, but it is important that you reinforce the message. It is important that we remind St. Lucians where we are, because over the last couple of months, you would see that even the daily reminders, the weekly reminders, they don't seem to have helped, because people still continue business as usual. And so the Prime Minister will continue as often as possible and as often as is necessary to address the nation, to address St. Lucians, to remind them of where we are, to remind them of our revised protocols, and to ask of them that we continue to observe, keep each other safe, and to keep our country safe.
To many critics of the Prime Minister and this government, the curfew and the shutdowns seem to be sporadic. Sometimes we're shut down, sometimes we're not. The main criticism is that we should have just been shut down completely, and we should have managed the virus internally, shut our borders, and allow for us St. Lucians to be able to manage ourselves, manage our business, and so on, and thereafter open the borders. And of course, there has been a greater debate about an us versus them, St. Lucians versus tourists, the economics of it versus our health. What do you say to those critiques?
I would say to them, sometimes it's just like me sitting in the hot seat and perhaps somebody viewing on television and say, why did she answer that question in that way? It's a totally different story when you were on the outside looking in and when you're on the inside sitting in the hot seat. And I use that example because every single thing that we do, again, I want to remind St. Lucians, these decisions are directed from and by the health officials. These are not decisions that the cabinet wake up one morning and say, let's close this place and let's shut this place. And I also want to explain that the situation is also very fluid. If you would recognize and look at where we were last year, perhaps around that time, we had just about 1 or 2 cases. By the time we hit August and September, we were in the 20s and the 30s. But by the time you hit October, November, you just started climbing and going back down. So the situation is not something that is stagnant. This is something that the world over, everybody has been caught off guard, and everybody is doing a little bit of trial and error. We are learning from each other's experiences. So many times we have been compared to Barbados. So if Barbados, for example, takes a course of action that some St. Lucians deem should be taken by St. Lucia, then there's an uproar. Oh, Barbados did this. Why aren't we doing this? And then Dominica does something. Then they say, well, Dominica is doing this. Why don't we do this? So every single country has its own dynamics. We all have our own situations. We have our own culture. And at the end of the day, we learn from each other. The CMOs of the region meet every single week. They dialogue with each other. They exchange with each other. They advise each other. And we take that advice from the CMO in making the decisions as to, do we shut down this sector? Do we open this sector? Do we continue with this for a while, etc.? And it is a situation that you must monitor daily and weekly, because if you let it or allow it to go just spiral out of control and do nothing, then it means that a greater part of your population becomes infected. So yes, they are a bit sporadic, I can say, but it is not because there is not a plan. It is because as the numbers go up, then we put actions. As the numbers go down, then we take another course of action.
Let's not look at Barbados and let's look at New Zealand. They were able to shut down their borders completely. And then they went from so many cases to none at all. Why can't we do like New Zealand?
Well, if you look at Barbados, let's just look at Barbados. Barbados did shut down completely. And then when they reopened, they allowed visitors, and then they allowed their people back to a sense of normalcy, and their numbers went up again, and they have to reshut again. So as I said, the situation is very fluid. It is very difficult to compare one country to another. We had a shutdown last year. We shut down completely from the month of April last year. We had a total shutdown. We shut down the borders. We shut down everywhere. And we had a gradual reopening. So I think St. Lucians need to be reminded that when we shut down in April, we only allowed visitors back in St. Lucia in July. We had a phased reopening. We reopened in certain sectors of the economy. We opened shops. We opened construction. We opened this and that. And then we started allowing for visitors to come in. So we've always had a plan. We've always phased it. But it is always with what is happening with our numbers. Where are we trending? And then we take the appropriate course of action. Will there be criticisms? I think there will always be. And is there room for improvement? There will always be room for improvement. But I think under the circumstances, we are doing the best that we can with the circumstances that we have. Financially, it is draining on the country. Some of our healthcare officials are drained. They've been at this for over a year. Our policemen, our firemen. It's taken its toll on everybody. But I have to say, I must congratulate every single one of them, because we have not given up the fight, and we will not give up.
Income support, Mrs. Charles. There are so many people who are affected. Yes, we know that our frontline workers are affected because they are battling this virus and this pandemic head on. But so many other St. Lucians are affected. There are so many people who are out of jobs, and there are other people who are still employed, but their earnings are significantly less. What kind of income support can these people expect from their government?
Well, as of late, the Prime Minister has been having discussions with the Ministry of Finance in terms of how can we provide a second tranche of income support. So I don't want us to forget the fact that between the months of April, May, June, July, and September last year, we did provide some level of support to various sectors of our society. For the poor and the vulnerable who are at home, we provided them with weekly food packages that were from the farmers and from marketing board. We gave them fruits, we gave them vegetables, ground provisions, and a protein in those baskets. And I think we gave baskets for 3 months in total to those communities. We also gave hot meals to the elderly and persons who were bedridden at home. We brought them a meal at least 2 to 3 times a week. And we ensured that they had something to eat. For our small business owners, our hairdressers, barbers, our vendors, our taxi drivers, we instituted an income support program for them because we recognized that the NIC had an income support program for NIC contributors. And because these persons were not necessarily part of the income contributors to NIC, the government felt it necessary. And so we provided about $8 million in support to them. We certainly will be looking at a second phase as to how much and what we can do. But it is under consideration, but you would appreciate as well that the government is now undergoing its budget exercise. So budgeting those activities is a little bit challenging, but I'm pretty sure once we get some fiscal space, we will be able to provide some support.
Do you think we overreached the first time around, Mrs. Charles?
No, you can never overreach because persons were suffering, persons did need that level of support. And I can tell you, even after we ended the income support, we still had a lot of calls from persons calling my office, calling the office of the Prime Minister, asking whether we're going to extend that support. We get calls daily of St. Lucians who still continue to ask for support. I'm very grateful to the Department of Equity. They have expanded the paupers list, what we call the paupers list. They've added 1,000 persons to that list. So that's an additional 1,000 persons we are reaching. They've also increased the amount of money that they were paying to them by $100. And so that in itself is going to provide a little bit of relief. We also have the electricity program where we're providing electricity support for persons who are unable to contribute or pay the electricity bill for a 6-month period. So at the end of the day, we are doing little bits and pieces. Certainly, everybody would appreciate it is not enough. There is only so much that you can do as a government, but we're trying our best.
Let's talk about vaccines before we go to the break. Currently, with the announcement by the Prime Minister, only about 20% of the population will be vaccinated. What is the plan for the rest of us? And I also would really like to know, will it be mandatory for everybody at some point to be vaccinated, or will you leave that up to people to decide?
Well, to answer your last question first, the Prime Minister did in his address to the nation indicate that the vaccines would be optional. Unlike perhaps our vaccines like polio, etc., we have for children that we try to make it mandatory. We recognize that a lot of persons do have reservations, and so nobody is going to be forced to take the vaccine. However, we would like to encourage everyone to read about it, research about it, see what other countries are doing, see the impact it's having, and encouraging persons as much as possible to take the vaccine. But it will not be forced upon you. And yes, in the initial, because everybody was scrambling to get vaccines. And so there had to be an allocation by the WHO per country to ensure that at least every single country got at least a percentage of their population vaccinated in the first instance. And so when we spoke to the AstraZeneca, the 74,000 doses we were getting, this was our allocation of our 20% for the first 20% of the population. However, subsequent to that, once we were informed that India had received approval for the vaccine, our government immediately wrote to the Indian government and we requested from them 100,000 doses to purchase and 90,000 doses as a donation. Currently, CARICOM is negotiating. You would have appreciated some countries have already gotten theirs. We are soon to get confirmation in terms of how many. So we will be getting from the Indian government. We're just negotiating what is the amount that we can purchase and what is the amount we will get in terms of grant funding. But in the interim, we will be getting the 74,000 doses as a first and then we will be getting from the Indian government as well. There are other vaccines all around, but the CMO has indicated she's awaiting validation from the WHO for those vaccines before she can recommend to the government of St. Lucia to interact and to look at purchasing those vaccines.
Why not write to our sister country, Cuba?
Well, as I said, there are lots of vaccines and other medications that are out there for the treatment of COVID-19. But the CMO has consistently sought guidance from PAHO and WHO, and this is where she takes the directives from. Now, there's a lot of politics worldwide involved in those, and we try as much as possible not to get at that level, but at least to seek guidance from PAHO and WHO in terms of which ones are safe at this point in time, and that's what we use as a guide.
We've never had to conduct mass vaccination in our history as an independent nation, or even before our attainment of independence. What is the plan for mass vaccination of our citizens so that we can all fight this pandemic?
Well, as a first step, the Ministry of Health has started an educational campaign. You would have seen them on the various television stations on NTN, speaking to the vaccine, speaking to the rollout plan, and how soon we intend to roll out the vaccine. That the first phase is to educate people about it, let them know that we will be rolling it out, and let them know who are the persons in the first tier or in the first phase of receiving the vaccine. Once they've done that as a first phase, we now have phase 2 that is ongoing, where you have a team of persons. Team of persons include persons from Office of the Prime Minister, from Events St. Lucia, as you rightly said, because it's a massive rollout, and so you need all hands on deck. You have persons from the Ministry of Tourism, you have persons from the Ministry of Health. It's a wide cross-sector of agencies coming together to assist in the rollout plan of the mass vaccination. So we are well on the way. As soon as we have confirmed and we're very much assured that this is how we're going to do it, where we will do it, we will do the phase 3, which is the re-education, indicating to persons where you're going to get your vaccine, how you're going to get the vaccine, what are the different points of areas we'll be using to vaccinate the persons. But I can assure you, all these discussions have been held and all the plans are being drawn up. But as a first phase, the Ministry of Health is now just educating people about the vaccine.
Thank you, Mrs. Charles. Thank you for joining us in the hot seat this evening. Please stay tuned. When we come back, we will talk to Mrs. Charles. What does the directive implementation really do? Stay tuned.
St. Lucia, Hot 7 TV was the first to bring you a full HD newscast. Now, here's another first. The Hot 7 Nightly News is now your first newscast for the evening in St. Lucia. You heard right. The Hot 7 Nightly News is now at 7:15. Yes, tune in at 6:45 p.m. and be the first to catch the latest happenings in your world. On the run, watch us on your cell phone or tablet via the Caribbean Hot FM app. Trusted, objective journalism from our diligent news team. Get it fresh, get it hot. The Hot 7 Nightly News, now at 7:15. Watch us on channel 117 on Flow, channel 7 Plug and Play, or follow us on Facebook Live on Caribbean Hot 7 TV.
Thank you for staying tuned. We are in the hot seat with Mrs. Nancy Charles, Director of Implementation. And where we left off, we just really want to know, Mrs. Charles, there has been a criticism that A, why do we need a Director of Implementation? 2, is this job just a made-up job for the girls, perhaps?
I think perhaps my critics, maybe they should speak to the Honorable Prime Minister, they should speak to other members of cabinet, and certainly they should speak to some of the senior technical public servants within the various ministries, and they would get a better appreciation of what a Director of Implementation does. In a nutshell, when we came into government, we recognized there were so many different projects and activities that the government wanted to implement. But over the past years, you would have heard governments over and over speak to this, to that, etc. But there was nobody specific in ensuring that those projects were on stream and that they were being implemented. And so the government of St. Lucia, in collaboration with the CDB, embarked on a pilot project with delivery associates in terms of a unit specifically dedicated to the implementation of key projects. Not every single project, but key projects of the government. And that is where my role comes in, is to ensure that we're on top of those projects, that whatever issues they have, that they are brought to the attention of the appropriate authorities, and that we ensure that those projects are on stream. Whatever challenges that they may be facing, to ensure that there is interdepartmental and interministerial meetings to ensure that we can just smooth sail, because as you know, it is one government. Whatever the project is, it's not a ministry's project, but it is a governmental project. So I love my role. I love the interaction and the opportunity it gives me to interact with a lot of government agencies. But certainly I can tell you, if it is a job for a girl, this girl is doing a very good job of it.
Can you give us 3 examples of your key projects? And also, why you?
I think I come from, I've never worked in government before. And I come from the private sector. Being out there, I've managed companies before. So I've managed at least 3 businesses before I came into government and before I became very intimately involved with politics / United Workers' Party. And so the Prime Minister saw that as my strength. He saw that I am a mover, somebody who makes things happen. And I think he thought I was fitting for the role, and he did not make a mistake. It is what I do. It is what I love doing. Maybe some of the key projects that I've been working on to ensure that we are implementing is one. I can tell you I'm very proud of the DSH project. I've been involved with DSH project from day one. And I think for me the challenge was because a lot of St. Lucians, especially opposition persons, felt that this was not a project that was going to get off the ground. I wanted to make it a flagship project for me to ensure that it was implemented. I'm very pleased and proud to say we got the project going, we got the racetrack going, we had the first race in December 2019, we had a race in February as well, but unfortunately COVID came and we were not able to continue with the plan. But the racetrack is there, the horses are there, the evidence is there to show that the project came to fruition. So I'm very proud of this, and St. Lucia as well should be proud that we were able to achieve this, notwithstanding COVID.
The 2 others?
2 others, I can tell you perhaps St. Jude. It is very close and very passionate to me. There were a lot of challenges with St. Jude's, and I think it took a lot from me because I had to work with a lot of different government agencies and also to work with outside agencies, the Taiwanese government, for example, OECC, who's been assisting us with the project. And then we had COVID that hit last year. The challenges in sourcing material, ensuring that we kept the project on stream and that we did not lose focus. That was a challenging project for me, but we are still on stream. We will complete St. Jude's, and we will be giving St. Lucians a world-class facility.
What would you say are your measures of success for these projects?
I think the measures of success for me is either the progress where we're at or the completion of the project. So in the case of the DSH, for example, the project was completed. We have the racetrack. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we're not able to continue with that aspect, but the project still continues because the investor, Mr. Akin, has continued to bring in other investors to look at the developments of the land. If you drive by down to the site right now, you will see construction activity is happening in terms of building some of the various side projects there, so it is still continuing. So for me, the measure of success would be whether they completed or the progress level that they're at.
Let us stay on the topic of construction. We see a lot of construction taking place around the island, and you hear constantly, whether on social media or traditional media, we can't eat roads. What determines your priority? And do you think that roads and other infrastructural projects should be prioritized at this time?
I will say to St. Lucians that if there is one thing they need to be proud of their Prime Minister for, it is for him to take that stand and to take that initiative. Crystal, we would all appreciate that. As we said, there is COVID and we have to learn to coexist with COVID. COVID will come, COVID may go, but we must continue to exist. And it means that our infrastructure still needs to be repaired. Our roads still need to be rehabilitated. Our construction projects will still have to go on. At the end of the day, you would see that we still had an influx of tourists coming in. So it means that tourism is not dead and that you still need to continue the airport. So it doesn't mean that because of COVID, we stop living and we just stay dead in our tracks. It means we have to move, but under different circumstances. And I am very proud of our Prime Minister for taking that initiative and recognizing that if we close down everything, it means that it would put a bigger strain on the government to provide the income support that you talk about. And government is only limited in its resources. When you shut down and you close down, there's no money coming in. We all know that government does not have a reserve fund. And so at the end of the day, you must find the money somewhere to feed and to take care of your people. What better way to do that than to continue with the projects? Now, most of the criticisms with those projects are, why did they use the money to do the roads and to continue those projects? And why couldn't they use the money for everything else? We have explained that those projects were in train prior to COVID. The monies for those projects were already approved and agreed for prior to COVID. We were not in a position with none of those projects to go back and to renegotiate the terms and conditions of those loans and to say, we don't want it for the road anymore, we want it for this or we want it for that. It would take another lengthy period of time to renegotiate, etc., etc. And so what the Prime Minister said was that if we continue with the project, it means that persons would now not be too much out of pocket, meaning that persons would now continue to work. It would generate economic activity. If you have persons into construction, it means cement is selling. It means the hardware store is open. It means the people who work at the hardware store can get a job and they can continue work. It means these people take money home to their family. The wives can go to the supermarket, they can shop. So the supermarket sells. The farmer provides the supermarket. And so you can look at the economic impact of those road projects. But I just wanted to explain to you as well that initially the Prime Minister had indicated that we would undertake a $1.50 in terms of the road tax to undertake a complete rehabilitation of our road program. That is a commitment we made to the St. Lucian public, and that is a commitment we intended to keep. I just wanted to give you a few facts, if you would bear with me, in terms of the previous administration and how much money was spent on road rehabilitation, so you can get an appreciation of what we inherited in terms of road. So in 2012, they spent $8 million on road rehabilitation. 2013, $5 million. 2014, $5.4 million. 2015, $4 million. 2016, $2.3 million. In total, about $24 million in 5 years on road rehabilitation. When we came into office, our roads were in a deplorable condition. Every single road you can think of in St. Lucia was in a deplorable state. And so we had to spend millions of dollars. So I just want to give you a few examples. One road alone, the Saltibus Road, $17 million to rehabilitate just that one road. Casaba Road, we did $4 million. We did Piat, we did Marisil, that would be about $9.4 million worth of road. New development in Soufre, $6.2 million road. Larry Tret, $2.6 million. And I can tell you Jacmel, Grosile, Balata, Kakojira, every single constituency in St. Lucia has been touched by our road rehabilitation project. And that was critical and important because it meant that there was continuity, employment was being generated, and that persons were earning an income.
Thank you for those figures, but can you put that in perspective? You said the last administration spent X amount on roads. Can you put that in perspective with your budget compared to their budget? What was the percentage of their budget that went to roads as opposed to, for instance, health or education? Can you put that in
Well,
perspective?
here's the smart thing about it, which is what the Prime Minister has advocated for. Every single new expenditure, he's indicated that we need to have an income stream or a revenue stream to take care of that expenditure. When we looked at our roads, we recognized that if we were to go through our normal budgeting process, we would not be able to rehabilitate those roads. Hence the reason we put in the $50 tax. And what we did with the $50 tax is that we calculated via the Ministry of Finance that we estimate with the $50 tax based on consumption that we would be able to generate, for example, in total $30 or $32 million in revenue under that road tax. And so we use that money and use it as a security deposit to get a loan with the bank as an advance to give us that money so we could spend it every year to rehabilitate the road. So it is a new way of thinking. It's not the normal way, and that is what Prime Minister Alan Chastanet brings to the table, creativity, that we don't continue along the same path. And it's the same thing with the airport redevelopment tax, that we recognize that we would not have had money in our budget to pay for the airport. And so we put in the airport development tax, that is the source of revenue, use that money as a loan with the Taiwanese to upfront us the money. And so every time a visitor comes in and they pay that tax, we pay back on that loan so it doesn't come from the government coffers.
There has been criticism of your government, led by Prime Minister Alan Chastanet, that invariably this government favors big businesses over small businesses and sole trader businesses and, just entrepreneurs starting up. So, for instance, you mentioned DSH earlier. There is, of course, the Cabot Holdings situation up at Kazaba. We have sandals, we have bigger businesses that remain open, but small businesses, bars, and just struggling sole trader businesses are shut down right now, and it seems like their welfare is not as important. Can you speak to that?
I think for an ordinary person sitting outside, it may seem that way, but certainly that is not the case. Both types of businesses have their role to play in our economy. The big businesses, and investment is necessary to generate new money, because if you only keep your small businesses and all they have is just the money going around in a pool, you need fresh money to come in, and that's where the investments come in. Alan Chastanet came in as Prime Minister on an investment portfolio as well. And so it was very important for him and for this administration to ensure that we brought in a level of new investors into this country. Under the 5 years of the Labour Party, there was not one new investment that came into this country. But we coming into office, we brought those investors, the Cabot, the DSS, etc. And notwithstanding, in terms of the criticisms of DSH, for example, government has not given DSH one penny. We have made certain decisions, and we've made certain allocations to them in terms of the land that we've made affordable to them. And this is what we've done for other investors who's come to St. Lucia. We've made the land affordable to say, if you come, this is what we have. It's land. We'll give it to you at a reduced price. Invest, build it up, employ our people, and generate economies of scale. And that's what all governments do. So there's no favor. But for small businesses, I do want to remind them that this administration 2 years ago, via the Cabinet of Ministers, ensured that we put in their regulations to ensure that small businesses can benefit from fiscal incentives just like the big businesses. So if you're a small hairdresser and you want to start up, you want to bring in your dryers and your other equipment, you go through the Ministry of Commerce via the SEDU, you fill out the application form, and they ensure that you can get incentives to be able to bring in your equipment. Musicians, persons who are in the television business, all those type of businesses, they qualify for fiscal incentives. This is what this government has done to encourage small businesses to ensure that they can continue to survive. However, with the pandemic and the shutdown, it's unfortunate that sometimes the food business, for example, while you may be able to say at this time a clothing store may not necessarily be more essential than food, you have to prioritize everybody must eat. But maybe we can stay with the clothes we have for a few extra days, but we can't stay out of food. And so you find a particular food establishment may have to be open and a clothing store may have to be closed. It is not because it is prioritized in terms of who's more needy than each other, but it is prioritized in terms of where we're at with the pandemic. What is it that we have to do to protect the health and security of St. Lucians, and some of the tough decisions that we've had to make.
Tough decisions indeed, and tough decisions in an election year. You, of course, have heard the rumblings that the state of emergency is a ploy by this government to spring an election on us, or use the state of emergency in order for it to campaign and to try to win another term in St. Lucia. Is there any truth to that?
I think the actions of the government will show that there is no truth to that. So if you look at the activities of the two political parties, you would notice from the start of the pandemic from last year even to now, the opposition has never stopped campaigning. They've had their virtual town hall meetings, they've had their marches, they've had all those type of activities politically motivated. And every single press conference, every activity they have, they speak about elections and politics. The government, on the other hand, and Prime Minister Shasney has said it many times, whilst he will not go past beyond what is acceptable on the in the Constitution, his focus has never been about the election. His focus has been ensuring that we can provide for small businesses, that we can ensure that there is sufficient income to pay the public servant, and ensure that the economy remains afloat. His focus has been on St. Lucians, protecting the safety of St. Lucian, protecting the lives of St. Lucians, and protecting the livelihood of St. Lucians.
So can you explain how the Prime Minister is appearing in constituencies, doing house to house and supporting candidates?
Well, I think most of the time when you see the Prime Minister going out in constituency, one, he's always in his constituency. Remember, he's a parliamentary representative first and foremost. And in most instances, some of the constituencies, people are crying out for help. So the Prime Minister has been, in the last few weeks, going out on a mask campaign, for example. You would appreciate for independence, we've launched this mask campaign. And everywhere he goes, he tries as much as possible to get a feel from the people, to find out what is happening on the ground, and to better understand why is it so challenging and difficult for us to observe some of the protocols. What is it that St. Lucians are thinking? And I think as a proactive leader, that is very important, that you know from the ground, from the roots, from grassroots, what people are thinking, what people need, what is expected of people, so that you can better your decision making. So these are some of the things that the Prime Minister has been doing as he goes around, as well as distributing masks. Of course, he remains the political leader of a political party, so for sure, you try as much as possible to ensure that your party remains relevant as much. But his focus is certainly not the elections right now.
Mrs. Charles, are you still an executive member of the United Workers' Party?
No, I'm not. I'm a senior official of the United Workers' Party. Unfortunately, we had our conference of delegates last year, and there were a number of positions that went up for the party, including the position that I held, which was the first deputy chairman. And there were two of us going up for the position. That was myself and senior member Eldridge Stevens. Unfortunately, Eldridge Stevens came out victorious, but I remain very much attached to the party. I am very strongly affiliated. I'm a senior member. I'm asked at many times to speak on behalf of the party, and I will continue to represent the United Workers' Party.
That being said, can you tell us about the candidate selection? We heard from Mr. Herman Gil Francis 2 Wednesdays ago that he has been selected to run Vieux-Fort South. And since inevitably we have an election coming, can you tell us about the candidate selection for the United Workers' Party?
Well, in terms of the United Workers' Party, at this point in time, we have a two-pronged approach to the selection of candidates. So the first approach is that the constituency at their own level go through their process and select a candidate. And then once they have selected a candidate, they would now present it to the national executive. And at the national council level, the national executive will endorse that candidate. So we have now, at the point, with the exception of Herman Gill, who has not been officially endorsed, but he has been selected by the constituency, we now have our 16 candidates so far. The only candidate that remains to be endorsed would be for the Cashris South seat. We've not gone for the process for Cashris South as yet, but for now, we have now 16 candidates out of the 17.
Okay, so since you said just now that the Prime Minister is focused entirely on nation building and not on the election per se, should we expect anything before the end of this state of emergency in terms of politics and the United Workers' Party?
Well, in terms of the United Workers' Party, we are looking at what our options are. Obviously, we're very much aware that it is an election year, and we're not denying the fact that we will at some point in time have to begin officially our campaigning. We're doing some of the things that we need to do without giving you any of our secrets and where we're at. But I can certainly tell you that as a party, a political party, we're certainly doing our work and preparing as best as we can for an election. Maybe it is not very visible right now in terms of what we're doing, but I can certainly tell you we are preparing ourselves. The only person who can tell us when elections is the Honorable Prime Minister, and so all we're doing as a party, we're there just like the Labour Party. The Labour Party thinks we have an advantage, but we certainly as a party in government don't have an advantage. All the Prime Minister has said is, as a party, prepare yourselves, do what you have to do, so when the time is right, I will let you know when the date of elections is. So we're waiting on the Prime Minister to do that, but from a party perspective, we're preparing and doing what we have to do.
My final question for this evening, the United Workers' Party was not appreciative at all of the timing of the last election when the then Prime Minister, Dr. Kenny Anthony, called a very snap election, the quickest election that we've ever seen in the history of St. Lucia. Can we expect something similar this time around?
I doubt very much that the Honorable Prime Minister would use the same strategy as the last administration. As you say, we did not appreciate it. Constitutionally, I think you need to give about 21 days notice to dissolve the House and to go into your electioneering. We did not get a full 21 days with the last election being called. As you see, it was very snap. However, I think out of courtesy, I can certainly vouch for the Honorable Prime Minister that he will keep to whatever the legal mandate is and the legal dates are. He will keep to those legal dates and he will do nothing outside of the Constitution.
Thank you, Mrs. Charles, and thank you for joining us in the hot seats this evening. Please join us next week where we promise to bring you another exciting guest. Good night.
The Hot Seat is now too hot to premiere on the weekend. That's why from now on, you can catch new episodes of The Hot Seat every Wednesday from 8 p.m. That's right, Wednesday at 8 p.m. is now the first chance to see what's hot. Then catch a repeat of The Hot Seat in the Hot 7 Double Take on the weekend. Don't forget, new episodes of The Hot Seat is now on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Wednesday is now burning hot on Hot 7 TV, channel 117 on Flow, and channel 7 Plug and Play.
It's coming. Full island-wide coverage. Hot 7 Plug and Play digital antennas. All the TV you want. All the coverage you need. Coming soon.